The night sky was torn apart by massive fireballs plunging toward the ocean. Blinding light reflected off the pitch-black water as thunderous explosions shook the air. Julia's small yacht rocked violently as if it might be thrown into the sea. The wind howled in sharp gusts that whipped against the hull. The compass on the control table spun endlessly. The Earth's magnetic field was shifting. Every familiar rule of the ocean had vanished. Suddenly, a huge fireball struck the exact spot they had left only seconds earlier. Waves surged forward, and a towering column of water rose before the bow. White foam sprayed in a blinding mist. Farther away, enormous whales surfaced. They spouted mist and flicked their tails like ghostly giants circling the vessel. The air grew heavy with unease. Inside the cabin, Julia held her two children close. Their breaths were quick and shallow. Fear filled their eyes. The engine began to whine, and thick black smoke poured out. The waves kept battering the yacht. Each impact felt like it could split the vessel in two. In that moment, Julia knew everything had changed. The peaceful vacation had become a desperate race against nature. One moment of hesitation, and the ocean would swallow them whole. The Earth's magnetic field suddenly reversed. Its force drained the ocean dry. It was the first time the mother had joined the whole family on a yacht for a holiday. Golden sunlight and gentle waves spread across the horizon. Everything was so calm it felt like a dream. No worries, no burdens, only peace. The father, Tom, was teaching his son to fish from the deck. The daughter lay sunbathing while listening to music. No one noticed that Julia was swimming far from the yacht and had run into danger. Luckily, Tom spotted it in time. He told the children to watch the yacht and dove into the water like an arrow. He reached her quickly and wrapped his arms around her as she sank. With the help of their children, they pulled Julia back onto the deck. None of them understood how a strong swimmer like her could nearly drown in such calm water. Tom reminded them that no matter how good the weather seemed, they should never swim too far from the yacht. The scare passed quickly, and they continued their holiday. Today was their son's 13th birthday. That evening, the family prepared a grand dinner to celebrate, and each of them had a special gift for him. The atmosphere was warm and full of love. In the middle of the meal, the daughter's boyfriend Adam called on video. He wanted to show them a strange sight in the sky. It was not just clouds. Behind him, flashes of lightning in 7 colors flickered inside a dark cloud. While Adam was speaking, his signal suddenly cut off. The daughter grew uneasy. The weather there looked too strange. She felt something bad was coming. Tom stepped outside to check the sea and sky. What he saw was rare. Dozens of whales were scattered across the surface. They spouted water and slapped their tails like ghostly giants drifting around the yacht. The sight was against every natural law. Tom guessed they might be disoriented by the magnetic field or driven off course by a storm. Sometimes lost whales even charge onto shore. Suddenly, the yacht shook violently. It was unclear if a whale had struck it. Tom decided to dive down to check. Moments later, he surfaced with blood streaming across his body. Fortunately, Julia was a doctor. She quickly cleaned the wound, stitched it, and wrapped it. Tom said the dive had not been for nothing. He had found damage to the hull, and the engine was broken. The yacht could no longer move. They had no choice but to anchor and wait for rescue. But when the couple tried to call for help over the radio, they only heard strange noises or voices speaking in a language they could not understand. The eerie sounds kept coming, making both Tom and Julia uneasy. Still, they reassured each other. Their location was on a main shipping route. They had about 100 liters of water and 4 days of food. In that time, a ship would surely pass. While they held on to hope, strange noises echoed from outside. The whole family went to the deck and saw something unbelievable. Huge fireballs were falling from the sky into the sea. Fear gripped Tom. He steered the yacht away from the area, even if it meant blowing the engine. At that moment, a giant fireball struck exactly where the yacht had been anchored. When they looked closer, they saw it was an artificial satellite crashing down. Then, black smoke poured from the engine room. This time, the damage was total. The yacht could not start again. Strong winds rose. Tom told the family to go inside to shelter from the storm. No one noticed the compass spinning wildly. The Earth's magnetic field was changing again. Outside, the sea roared. Towering waves rolled toward them as if to swallow the small vessel whole. The yacht rocked like a leaf caught in a storm, ready to capsize at any moment. All they could do was wear life jackets and wait. They waited for the storm to pass or for death to come. The daughter could not stand the waves and vomited over and over. Julia's nose began bleeding nonstop. Tom kept sending distress signals, but no answer came. His ears rang and the sounds around him turned distorted. In their deepest fear, they endured a long, exhausting night. The next morning, they woke to a shocking sight. The vast ocean had vanished. In its place stretched a barren plain that reached the horizon. Only a few fish flopping helplessly on the ground proved that this had once been the sea. The daughter walked around with her phone searching for a signal, but after half a day, she still found nothing. Tom stared at the compass in disbelief. He said this phenomenon had happened 700,000 years ago, when the Earth went through a global catastrophe. Now it was happening again, and they had become unwilling witnesses. To find other survivors, the sun released several hydrogen balloons into the sky, hoping someone would see them. Tom kept trying the radio, and finally got a response from a man in Shanghai. The man was inside a submarine far from their position. He explained that according to current data, the magnetic reversal was temporary, and the sea would return soon. When it did, the water would rush back with a force powerful enough to crush anything in its path. Tom looked at their damaged yacht and knew they could never survive such waves. He asked if the submarine could rescue them. The man said it was a Chinese research vessel originally with 3 crew members. 2 were dead and there were 2 seats left. Tom immediately begged him to take his 2 children. The man was silent for a moment, then sent coordinates. Tom realized it would take 23 days to cross the dry wasteland to reach that point. The journey would be brutal, but they had no other choice. They began packing to leave. At that moment, a drifter with a long knife and a dog approached the yacht. Tom stepped forward cautiously and offered him a bottle of water. The man grabbed it and drank greedily. Then he turned hostile. One punch knocked Tom down. The knife plunged into his neck. Tom collapsed and stopped breathing. Julia came out to see what had happened but froze at the sight. She rushed back inside to protect the children. The man slashed her shoulder as she fled to the cabin. She locked the door and hid the children under a seat. She took a knife and slipped into the bathroom. Before long, the drifter climbed onto the deck. He broke in and began ransacking the cabin. The children held their breath, not daring to move. They watched him devour the family's food. Hearing a noise from inside, he started searching room by room. When he opened the bathroom, it was empty. Julia had crawled through a hatch into the hull. The dog found her and attacked. Julia stabbed it fatally. The man heard its whimper and ran outside to find it lying in blood. While he grieved, Julia slipped back inside, but he grabbed her leg and dragged her out. She struggled but was too weak. She reached for the knife, but he stomped on her wrist and knocked it away. He gripped her throat until she was almost unconscious. Seeing their mother about to be killed, the children could not hold back. The daughter grabbed the flare gun and fired at the attacker. Flames burst out. He fell and fire spread through the cabin. Julia grabbed the children and their luggage and fled. The 3 wept over Tom's body as the flames consumed the yacht. But the drifter was not dead. He crawled from the fire. Julia quickly led the children into the scorching sun. They did not stop until he was no longer in sight. They sat gasping for breath on the cracked earth. The daughter suddenly remembered something terrifying. She asked her brother if the drifter had found them because he saw the balloons. The boy lowered his head in silence. Guilt weighed heavily on him. He knew his careless act had cost their father's life. Julia did not blame him, but there was no time to linger. Footsteps pounded behind them. The drifter was tracking them again. The 3 ran on until their legs felt like lead and their breaths came in broken gasps. The boy was close to collapse from thirst. They found a bare patch of land and stopped to rest. Julia opened a water bottle for him, but it was empty. She saw the cap was loose and the water had leaked out. The daughter admitted she had been careless. Julia scolded her, but knew the water could not be brought back. They had to keep moving and hope to find more. Along the way, they came upon a crashed airplane. The wreckage was shattered but offered some shelter from the burning sun. Julia decided they would stay the night to recover. As the sunset faded, Julia held Tom's shirt close, breathing in the faint scent left behind. She told the children about the first time she met their father. She had been an intern at a small clinic when Tom came in after a diving accident while researching coral for his thesis. A malfunction had nearly killed him. Julia cared for him for a week, and love had grown between them. They had weathered many storms together. Now Tom was gone, but she had to protect the only part of him that remained. Late that night, the daughter awoke, needing to relieve herself. She stepped outside, unaware that a figure was approaching. It was the drifter. Julia rushed out, knife in hand. Her grief and rage gave her strength. She stabbed him again and again until he lay still. Breathing hard, she stared at his lifeless body, knowing she had finally avenged Tom. At dawn, Julia and the children left the wreck. They saw the drifter's corpse had been torn apart by some wild animal. His remains were scattered pieces of flesh. Julia knew it was justice for what he had done. They continued their journey and soon spotted a small pool of water ahead. Thirst drove the boy to gulp down a mouthful before Julia could stop him. The water was filthy and foul-smelling. Drinking it would bring sickness within minutes, but not drinking meant dying of thirst. Moments later, he doubled over in pain. Julia quickly searched for shelter and found a pile of abandoned plastic chairs. She used them to build a crude shade against the harsh sun. Luckily, she had medicine with her. She gave him an injection to ease the pain. They slept fitfully until Julia heard strange sounds outside. She stepped out and froze. Giant creatures were crawling toward them. The image of the drifter's mangled body flashed in her mind. She woke the children and told them to run. They ran until they saw a group of survivors in the distance. Julia called out, but the strangers turned and fled into a structure made from shipping containers. They slammed the door shut. Julia had no choice. She helped the children climb onto the roof. The sound of claws scratching grew louder. When she saw them clearly, her heart sank. They were enormous crabs with pincers sharp as blades. She pushed the children up first. As she climbed, one crab clamped her leg. Pain shot through her, but she pulled free. Looking down, she saw the creatures pouring into the container through a gap. Gunfire erupted inside, but the crabs were too many. Soon the shots and screams were gone. Julia panted and bandaged her wound before exhaustion claimed her, and she fell asleep. When Julia woke, the sun was already high. She panicked when she saw the children were gone. She climbed down and soon found a gun on the ground. She loaded it and searched the area calling for them. Relief washed over her when she saw them unharmed. They said they had gone looking for help but found no one alive. Julia unloaded the gun and poured gunpowder over her wound, then lit it to cauterize. The pain made her clench her teeth, but the bleeding stopped. Inside the containers, they found a few bottles of water left behind. They drank deeply until their thirst eased. Julia contacted the man in Shanghai again on the radio and told him her map was gone. She did not know which way to go. He checked and said the distance was not as far as she thought, but the route would be difficult. They would have to cross a massive canyon to reach the submarine. The three began their trek and spent tremendous effort getting to the canyon floor. All around them were the sun-dried bodies of countless fish. In narrow sections, stagnant pools of murky water held rotting corpses that reeked in the heat. They quickened their pace to escape the stench. Suddenly, a deep rumble came from above. Rocks tumbled down from the cliffs. The children leapt aside in time. Julia was also unhurt, but the path ahead was blocked by huge boulders. She knew they had to get past or they would never reach the submarine. But the slope was still crumbling and the entire canyon could collapse at any moment. She checked her children were safe and urged them to go on without her. The children refused to leave her. Julia's body was failing. Her wounds and exhaustion kept her from standing. Hearing their mother's voice calling from below tore at their hearts, but they knew they could not stay. The sister realized if they hesitated, all three would die. She pulled her brother away from the edge and began to climb. This was the chance to live that their parents had given their lives for. They pushed themselves over each rocky ledge until at last they saw the submarine in the distance. They ran to it and pounded on the glass. The man from Shanghai appeared. His body was covered in wounds, and it was clear he had survived an attack by the giant crabs. He hurried to open the hatch and told them to get inside quickly. The sea could return at any moment, and time was short. But the sister did not enter. She handed her brother to the man and turned back to find Julia. Down in the canyon, Julia was surrounded by the giant crabs. She fired shot after shot to keep them back, but there were too many. When her bullets were gone, they kept coming. Then her daughter appeared and grabbed her hand. They climbed together up the rock wall. Falling stones blocked some of the crabs' advance. Mother and daughter scrambled free and ran toward the submarine. The man pulled them inside, but just as Julia stepped in, one crab caught him and dragged him out. He vanished into its crushing pincers. Julia slammed the hatch shut. Through the window, they saw the swarm closing in. Far beyond them, a massive wall of water was rising. The sea had returned. Julia told the children to sit and fasten their harnesses. She remembered the man's warning that his crew had died because they were not strapped in. The three held hands tightly. The roar of the wave drowned out every other sound. Water struck and lifted the vessel. The cabin shook violently. They were tossed in the current as if falling into a dark abyss. Memories of fear and happiness flooded their minds. Then everything went black. When they opened their eyes, they were still alive. The submarine had drifted near shore. Outside lay a ruined city with no sign of life. But the three of them were together. That was enough to keep going.